we have the issue of setting performance targets for individual buildings in isolation of the context in which they exist. I do not like to see the idea that each and every building will be carbon neutral. Each and every building would be net zero energy. It makes no sense to me. Some buildings could be energy positive. Some can be energy negative. But the issue is on aggregate is where we need to get to those targets. So that's the argument of setting the performance target at a community level, of which some buildings may be more, some buildings be less, but on balance, we've achieved that goal. It also raises the question of, look, at carbon neutrality of buildings cannot be separated from the carbon issues associated with the transportation. You have to look at a complete system which takes into account all the various ways in which carbon plays out, not just that associated with buildings. So the performance assessment targets for building, I think we've been obsessed over the last 2 decades with the idea of assessment. We're in a culture of assessment. It wants to essentially put a number on everything we have. I think that's been interesting for 2 decades, but I'm not sure that's where we need to go in the future. So I think we need to have tools or approaches or ways of understanding relationships between things rather than the things themselves. So again, performance tools which are solely directed at understanding the performance of a thing in isolation, I think will diminish through time. It's been very useful for it. We had 2 decades. It's helped us. Green design has helped us. But now I think it's time to move on and set a larger picture and understand what that might be.
Those who are involved with creating or changing buildings actually get much closer to how they work after they've finished. So essentially the perspective moves from delivering buildings that perform to just delivering buildings, because often you find that the inputs you make during briefing, design and construction, the outputs you get in terms of what you can measure when a building's handed over, and the outcomes in terms of what you get when the occupiers are in there are very different, and what we need to do is bring them closer together. Soft landings is actually a technique that you can put alongside any system you have for briefing, designing, constructing and completing a building, and say we're going to be more engaged with outcomes. So you can change your attitude without changing. You don't have to adopt a different process, but what you do is you adopt some of the principles and map them into your process. I mean, one important thing we've found is that it needs a champion. It needs somebody within that process who's focused on outcomes and can challenge everybody else.